Next curve.
Welcome to another episode of Next Curve's Rethink podcast, where tech industry thought leaders discuss the trends and technologies that are shaping our digital future. I'm Leonard Lee, Managing Director and Founder of Next Curve, and today I'm very happy to have once again a very special guest, Foong King Yew, renowned telecom analyst and strategy consultant. He just happens to also be an old Gartner colleague of mine who I deeply respect. Great to have you again on our podcast, Foong.
Thank you, Leonard. Always a pleasure to be back.
Why don't you take a moment and share a bit of your background and what you've been up to, especially on the research front. I know that you've been covering a lot of material. You have a particular interest that I think our audience will be also interested in.
Well, sure, Leonard. Basically, my interest really lies in helping the communication service providers deal with all the market changes that's happening around them. In particular, how do they handle disruptive technologies? How do they better leverage innovation? And also, in a way, to also see, there's so much changes in the world these days, right? COVID-19, you have the US-China Technology War, so on and so forth, and how these externalities will affect the communication service providers.
Right.
And of course, looking at how they can grow as well. What are the promising adjacent market spaces that they could effectively go into and grow their revenues.
Wonderful. And I know that you've been paying particular attention to some of this OpenRAN stuff that's going on and all the excitement about that and some of the the energy that's been forming around that recently. And we'll probably touch on that later on in this conversation. But today, we will be talking about what a Biden administration will mean for the technology industry, in particular, as it pertains to 5G leadership in the midst of tight tensions between the US and China. And Foong and I will be talking about the following topics. Number one, what is the industry impact of the ongoing trade war between China and the United States? Number two, what will a Biden tech policy look like? So we're going to share what our hypotheses are in that regard. And then third, what are the implications of a Biden tech policy on 5G globally? And finally, we'll wrap things up with what will the OpenRAN movement lend to 5G leadership? So those are the four things that we'll talk about in this session. So once again, Foong, thanks for joining me to discuss this timely topic. And this is a bit of a refresh of a talk that we did last year in the midst of the escalating tech war between the US and China, as well as the pandemic. So let's talk about where we are in the tech war between the US and China, which really started to take off at the beginning of last year. Let's jumpstart this discussion with this first item, which is what is the industry impact of the trade war? And so a couple of things that you and I had talked about, the first of which is this heightened risk due to the tensions between the United States and China on the trade front. Really, the technology industry broadly has taken center stage, right? And we talked about how market opportunities, especially for U.S. firms, have come under risk. So maybe you can share some of your thoughts in that regard.
Well, I think this technology war between the U.S. and China, right, it's also a battle between pragmatism and ideology, right? A lot of the actions or the penalties that has been imposed, I think, largely stems from the fact that the U.S. today have to contemplate the possibility that it may become number two behind China a few years down the road, right? And there is that palpable fear. And it is bipartisan in nature, but by the way, right? So I believe China would have anticipated this as well, and it is pushing for technology independence as well in a way, so as to not to be overly reliant on US technology. So today you're seeing basically China, pushing forward in the new areas such as the IoT, artificial intelligence, analytics, so on and so forth, to gain that technology leadership. Now, unfortunately, all these trade wars and technology wars, right? A lot of observers and the mass media particularly have sort of like distilled all this and focused on one single technology as the key issue, 5G. 5G has become the proxy for all this technology battle. And that's not true, right? 5G is fundamentally an enabler. You have to look at how a nation coordinates the other technologies as well. Things like artificial intelligence, analytics, IoT, cloud computing, so on and so forth. All these technologies are very closely tied or related to the 5G momentum as well. It's how a country organizes or orchestrates its strategic plans around this technology that's going to matter more, as opposed to just one single technology called 5G. Right. So we have to look at this issue, from the correct perspective.
Right. Yeah, and it has been very interesting that 5G has come to the forefront in this so-called tech war. And the thing is that I think there's also just this general misunderstanding of 5G. 5G is a technology standard that's established by the 3GPP. It's global in nature. And so while there may be attempts to create different varieties of the implementation of 5G standards, right? And there may be different sets of technology that contribute to those implementations. 5G itself is fundamentally this global initiative and a global effort by the telecom industry to foster global interoperability and standardization of the technology. So where I think things get really competitive, if you will, in the context of this tech war is the actual implementation. How quickly can we actually roll the infrastructure out and start to garner the economic benefits of that are promised by the 5G infrastructures, right? The telco infrastructure, the digital infrastructures, if that's what you want to call it. So, I agree with you. It's very interesting how the technology has become the subject of contention, whereas the technology manifests itself in a lot of different ways across the globe, in the implementations, right? By the operators, by the technology vendors. And, one of the things that I would say here is that it's been an interesting year, especially with these entity lists. A lot of these Chinese tech companies being put on the U.S. entity list by the Commerce Department, led by Wilbur Ross. And this is for, the former administration. In a lot of ways, some of these policies didn't necessarily have a lot of teeth. There was a lot of bluster, but many of the banned companies eventually were able to get supplied by the U.S. firms that were ultimately scrambling to get licenses to sell to these customers. And by and large, they were able to get those licenses. So it'll be interesting to see how this policy plays out going forward as we look into a Biden tech policy that we'll talk about in a moment. But the second thing I wanted to talk about is the sense that there's this bifurcating technology landscape, the trend toward, East versus West type of eventuality for the future of 5G and maybe possibly other technology topics. What are some of your thoughts there?
I think in the longer term, right, bifurcation, if it does happen, will not serve anybody well, right? It just creates more fragmentation, right? And I think all the major players are well aware of this. The issue here is that, policies today have been largely driven by ideology, and pragmatism has been pushed to the sidelines, right? What a lot of observers and a lot of policymakers don't realize is that if you do hurt China and the Chinese companies, right, inevitably they are also your customers, the American customers. So by hurting the Chinese companies, you are also inevitably hurting the US companies as well. The world is so much, interlinked today, such that it's a complex web of interdependencies, right? So it would be better if pragmatism were to drive the policy making as opposed to ideology.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think there's some prevailing alignment with the economics, the current economics as well, right? And although I going back to what I was saying about the amount of bite that these policies of the previous administration, whether or not they actually whether or not that actually has substance and will continue to maybe develop substance going forward with the Biden administration. So why don't we do this? Let's go on to our next topic here, which is our thoughts on what a Biden tech policy would look like. So Foong, what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of folks out there right now hypothesizing about what a Biden tech policy will look like, as well as a trade policy, especially toward China. What are some of your thoughts there?
My views, Leonard, are that from an approach perspective, very little will change, right? And the reason why I say that is because President Biden cannot afford to be seen as weak in dealing with China, right? The anti-China sentiments are bipartisan in nature, and come 2022, there's going to be a Senate elections as well, and doubtless he will be keeping a close eye on the issues there, because what he does today will almost certainly impact the future political landscape come 2022. So he has to tread very, very carefully. So I would say that there may be changes in terms of form, but in terms of substance, I believe nothing much would change. The tough approach would still carry on. Now, as to how much bite these policy measures would have, I would say one truism in this world, right, is that there will always be loopholes.
Right.
There are never, always this watertight, policies where everything goes as planned and everything is hunky-dory, right? The real world just doesn't work that way. And as I mentioned earlier, the more you hurt and penalize China, inadvertently you will also be hurting your own economy. Yeah. Because the US and Chinese economies are just so closely interlinked from not only from a supply chain perspective, but also from a consumption perspective.
Yes. Right.
Can the US find another substitute customer to replace the amount of technology trade with China? I think that's going to be very difficult given the size of China today. Now, if the US wanted to do that, say 30, 40 years ago, yeah, sure, it would certainly be very, very effective. But not today, because one of the advantages that China has is that China is able to think strategically on a long-term basis. They don't have the possibility of changes in government every 4 years. So they can really plan ahead and execute for the long term. Take, for example, Made in China 2025 and also China Standards 2035. Right? These are the two key technology initiatives that China will be has and will be implementing. Right? And it has the ability to follow through consistently over the years. And it's very different in the US. Come 2024, we may see potentially the Republicans coming back into power again. and then all the policies and all the initiatives that the Democrats have put in place may be torn down again.
Yeah.
So it's like, one step forward, one step back. And that really, is one of the key points that I like to highlight here, right?
I'll agree with you on all of those points. I think one of the things that I'll add, though, is I think there's going to be a reset, a revisitation of some of these policies. I think there was, admittedly, a lack of transparency in the handoff, the transition between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. And I think what the Biden administration, especially the Commerce Department and State Department, will do is reevaluate some of these policies. And while what might actually happen is that where there may not have been as much substance, there will be substance. There will be a consistency and intent to be firm and to ensure that the U.S. exacts certain and encourages and influences certain behavior changes by the Chinese. That'll definitely happen. And the thing is that I think in terms of the form, I absolutely agree with you. We're back to diplomatic measures and means, and moving more toward the second item that you and I talked about, which is sort of this restoration of trade alliances, right? Sort of this probably what will be a soft, if not hard, abandonment of this America First policy, right? Where we're going to go back to our allies and start to work with them in coalition to counter some of the more aggressive moves that China has been making over the last couple of years.
I think one other point with regards to this topic also is that if one were to fight an enemy and fails to vanquish the enemy, and the enemy survives, the enemy may, at the end of the day, emerge stronger. Now, take for example, Huawei, right? The US have put such a huge amount of pressure on the company. But as one famous philosopher, I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche, said, what doesn't kill you can only make you stronger. So what all this external pressure is doing to Huawei is that, it is actually forcing Huawei to innovate, to think different, to maybe go into, new business areas, to maybe experiment with new business models, for example. And when all this is over, there is always the possibility that Huawei may emerge much, much stronger and may even possibly be a more formidable opponent to Western technology companies. So that may be the potential outcome of all this technology pressures and sanctions, against Huawei.
Yeah, and I think in general, the media and even in the industry underestimates Huawei. And when you look at what they're doing, and when you consider they're one of the only vertically integrated, highly integrated ICT vendors out there. I mean, they have enterprise, they have the carrier stuff, they have the enterprise stuff, they have cloud, they have the endpoint, consumer endpoint, enterprise endpoint. They have the whole stack. They are very consciously working on an alternative mobile computing model. I'm not saying that it's alternative from 5G. It will adhere to the standard, but they're looking at a different model that will have likely more favorable economics than the conventional way that we view and architect mobile computing today. This is very evident. So when you look at Harmony OS, you see some of the things that they're doing with edge computing and how they're trying to mitigate some of the risks and the disadvantages associated with being relegated to, let's say, non-leading edge process nodes on the semiconductor front, I think you're right. They cannot be trivialized in their ability to come back with something that will definitely be appealing to the markets that they focus on, but may even be appealing to some of the markets that they're currently being alienated from. So the question is,
Well,
how much that
one of the key issues here, right, is that Huawei would really have to address the elephant in the room, which is the deficit of trust in many developed markets, which Huawei have the ambitions to penetrate and grow their market share. So they will really have to work on it and regain the trust of their Western customers.
Right, but I think the trust deficit kind of cuts both ways. I think it's far too easy for Americans, folks in the U.S., to think that that we cannot be distrusted. But exactly to the point that you made earlier, China is not only proving that they're more resilient under this pandemic, they're also, like you said, intrinsically more stable in terms of their regime and their governance. What's been proven over the last 8 years probably is that the United States is a divided country, and we may not be able to offer that level of consistency. And that, as a partner, that could be a trust issue, right? Can allies depend on us, right? Do we make a good long-term partner? Or do we go from one administration that gets us out of the Paris Climate Accord, and then in the next 4 years we're back in? So, like you were saying, in another 4 years, are we out again? And so these are things that put trust at risk, and so I think we'll see how it goes. But as it relates to 5G globally, I think you're absolutely right. It's a mixed bag right now. I think that the Chinese are playing a pretty good game. I think they have some trump cards in their pocket to play, and the United States has to get its game going. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. So why don't we do this? Let's now talk about this excitement over OpenRAN. There's a lot of buzz around OpenRAN. There's this huge push to within the United States and Western countries that are part of this whole clean network coalition, if you will, to get OpenRAN going. This OpenRAN movement going. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, with regards to OpenRAN, it's one of those unintended consequences of the technology war between US and China. Because Huawei has been hit so hard, been banned from many Western countries, suddenly there is this prospect of a duopoly situation emerging, where they are just fundamentally two big radio access network vendors, Ericsson and Nokia, and then you have smaller players like Samsung and NEC in the mix, right? And there are concerns among governments and also the communication service providers that hey, I'm left with just two options. This is not going to be good for me, right? And then hence, governments in the UK and also in the US and in some other countries have woken up to the fact that there needs to be more competition, and the only other alternative technologies that they have is OpenRAN. I think it's going to be very difficult for the West to create a new equipment vendor up from scratch too many vendors have disappeared over the years. I could name, Nortel, Lucent,
Cascade Communications.
Alcatel, Siemens. They've all gone, right? And it's not easy to bring up a new player to replace one that have gone away. So now, governments are looking at OpenRAN as the hot technology to support. Now the question is, support from the government. What form should it take? And also, should governments really openly pick a winner, right? And then it becomes an issue of open markets, open capitalist markets versus one where the economy is controlled and well directed. Like in China, for example. So it becomes an ideology issue again.
Yeah, and one can argue it creates a market disruption, and possibly in the near term, more than likely some inefficiencies, right? Because OpenRAN has a long way to go, and I mean the movement, which is, OpenRAN, which is part of the TIP, is part of the movement, and then you have the ORAN alliance with the ORAN initiative. So I think that there's going to be a bit of a couple of steps back type of thing that's going to happen as the technology, the standards, as well as the ecosystem start to form, right? It's still pretty nascent. I mean, we have Rakuten, who's basically proven you can scale, you can deploy OpenRAN based infrastructure at scale, right? It doesn't matter what you think of their implementation, how it performs. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about that right now, but does it scale? Yes, it's a network that's operating right now, and they got 5G up in pretty much record time. But it's going to take a while for this to have the kind of legs that the old guard already had in place, right? And scale is the game. In telco, scale is the game. That's why you had so much consolidation, right? And so this sort of artificial, let's call it fragmentation of the market, is going to have a price attached to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, OpenRAN is certainly a classic disruptive technology. Today, for sure, the performance of the technology is still below or inferior to that of the standard, 5G that's been sold by Ericsson and Nokia, right? The performance is still not quite there yet, but that's the nature of disruptive technologies. It starts from a lower threshold or a lower base, and then gradually, surreptitiously, right, it improves by entering the right market segments where it is best suited for. Say, for example, the rural environment, or maybe in an indoor environment, or in areas where the demand for data performance is not that intense. It'll grab a foothold there, and from that foothold, it'll continue to develop and advance. And before you know it, come 2025, OpenRAN will likely be ready for prime time in urban areas. So vendors, traditional vendors who have been dismissive of OpenRAN or ignoring the dangers emanating from this technology, well, they better think twice. It's classic Clayton Christensen disruptive technology.
So wise words for our friends at Ericsson, right? Nokia. Well, Nokia's kind of getting into it. So, but Foong, hey, thanks for joining me today in this discussion, very timely discussion. And what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to maybe share with our audience how they can get in touch with you, how they can tap some of your great research.
Thanks very much, Leonard, for this. For those who are interested to follow up more on this topic and also on other related topics, you can easily get in touch with me through LinkedIn. My contact details are there, and I would certainly love to hear from the audience, any comments or feedbacks or any suggestions for future podcasts with Leonard. So thanks very much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And to our listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Apple podcast channels and visit us at www.next-curve.com. And until next time, be safe and stay healthy. Thank you once again, Foong.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Visit us at www.next-curve.com.